Today we are going to see the topic source. Source. As you know, a source is a device which converts mechanical, chemical and some other form of energy into electrical energy. Okay? Or in another way you could define the source is an active elements network meant for current, generally electrical energy. Okay, that is the definition of source. Okay guys, now we could say there are two types of source in electrical network. First one is called dependent source. Dependent source, and second one is independent source. Independent source. Independent source. Okay guys, what do you mean by dependent source? Before defining the dependent source, we could further classify dependent source are also two types. First is the voltage dependent source and current dependent source. You could say this one also. Independent source also classified into two types: voltage and current dependent source. Voltage and current dependent source. Okay guys, one by one we'll see the definition. What is independent source? What is independent source? What is independent source? The source, we could define the source which does not depend on any other quantity like voltage and current in the circuit. Voltage and current in the circuit. Voltage and current in the circuit. Okay guys, then how could you say that this is our voltage source? This is our voltage source, and if this voltage source is connecting in the circuit, connecting with the circuit, that we can show likewise In the diagram, whatever I am drawing, you could see this one connecting with the circuit, and these are the independent of the these are independent of the means what you could say, this voltage source is independent of these values. Whatever the value is there, it is independent of that. If we are connecting that one also, there is no effect in this voltage source. It's not going to be get affected by these circuit elements. Okay, it's not going to get affected by these circuit elements. That's why it is called the independent source. Okay guys, that's why it is called the independent source. This is the voltage source. Likewise, you could show the current source by this representation IS, and in place of voltage source you could connect the current source. This is the symbol representation of current source. This is the symbol representation of voltage source, but it is independent of the from the circuit. Whatever in the circuit elements are there, these are independent from that. Okay guys, they are not depending on other quantity in the circuit. That's why it is called the independent source. And as I told you, the voltage source represented by this sign plus minus, this is the voltage source symbol, and this is the current source symbol. That too, it is called the independent source. Okay, next further we will go to the dependent source. Second one is the dependent source. Second one is the dependent source. Dependent source. Second one is the dependent source. What is dependent source? The source whose output value depends upon the voltage or current at some other part of the circuit. Okay, with the example we will understand. Before that, we could see the symbol of voltage source in the dependent source. If voltage source is there, a dependent voltage source, we could represent by the diamond shape. Okay, we could represent by the diamond shape. Plus minus, this is the dependent voltage source, this is the dependent current source, and we represent by the diamond shape. Okay guys, further, and we could try to understand by the circuit diagram. Okay, for example, this is one circuit. Here actually we are going to see the dependent source, then you should not follow this circle, you should draw the diamond shape. Okay, in the circuit you see this is the 2 Ix and these are the resistance values, and it's depend on Ix. You could see in the diagram this voltage source value is dependent in the circuit value current Ix. Okay, that's why it is called the dependent source. 2Ix is the dependent in the circuit quantity. It could be current or voltage, but in this case you could say our voltage source is depending on the current value of Ix from the circuit. That's why it is called the dependent source. Okay, likewise you could see in the place of voltage source, sometimes you will find current source also. You could find, for example, this is the current source and this is your resistor. These are connecting with the capacitor and resistor. For example, this is the 4Vx and the Vx value is somewhere else. Okay, from here Vx value we are going to get from here. Okay, Vx value you are going to get from here. Likewise, it is depend on the circuit voltage, this dependent current source. Okay, this dependent current source is depending on the voltage. Okay guys, that's why this is called the dependent source, and it is the current dependent source which is depending in the circuit one voltage. Okay, this current source is depending on the voltage. Okay guys, that's why it is called the dependent source, which is the current dependent source. Okay, this value Vx value, if we are getting, we can get this current value. Okay, then this is the current dependent. Further, we are going to classify